What is up? Good evening. It is a solo show tonight. Should be about another week or so, and I can count on Coach coming back. Still working through some things, but he will be back soon. That being said, there are some things to talk about, some things that happened over the weekend that we've definitely got to discuss. The whole Brandon Aiyuk situation. We've got basically day one of the offseason camp starting. Brandon Aiyuk seems to be in person, which is always a good thing, especially if you are in favor of the 49ers signing him versus trading him. We got to talk a little bit about Brock Purdy. And then I'm going to end with something that's a little personal to me when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers. And it was a question about Steve Young that I want to address because I thought it was crazy that people were saying he's not a top 10 quarterback. So I'm going to make my case for Steve Young that he is a top 10 quarterback of all time. We're going to talk about those things plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's just me tonight. Just me tonight. Trade that toilet bug. I'm just joking. Yeah. Come on, man. It's BA. You got to love BA. Ekim says the 49ers have set the precedent on negotiations on top players numerous times. Yeah, that is an interesting point, Ekim. We're going to talk about it. So, the rumors started swirling this weekend that Brandon Aiyuk had requested a trade, and then his agent came out and denied everything. I want to say this. First of all, I don't believe that Brandon Aiyuk requested a trade. Everything I've heard is he wants to be a 49er. He has a certain number in his mind. I don't know what that number is. And the San Francisco 49ers also don't plan on trading him. So I don't expect Brandon Aiyuk to go anywhere. I never have. When the trade thing came out, I thought, okay, maybe it's possible. He's unfollowed the team on social media. I guess that could be true. And I'm not saying that it did happen or it didn't happen. I'm leaning towards it didn't. But if it did happen, his agent coming out and saying, hey, this certainly didn't happen. You've got to get better sources. One thing to keep in mind, you can go through his agent's Twitter, and around 2020, his agent gave credit to John Lynch for being a big part of why he has the career that he has. John Lynch is essentially his mentor. So even if a trade request had happened, this agent being menteed, I guess, by John Lynch tells you that he probably would come out and do damage control. That being said, I am not making the case that he did request a trade. I'm not saying that his agent is lying. I'm just simply saying understand who this agent is. He's obviously going to do what is in the best interest of Brandon Aiyuk. That's what he's paid to do. But at the same time, if he can scratch the 49ers back and do a little bit of damage control for John Lynch, he would certainly do that as well. So I want to be clear about that. But everything I've heard is that Brandon Aiyuk is going to stay a 49er unless something crazy happens. So what would crazy be? Well, I mean, if there's a number that Brandon Aiyuk is simply unwilling to budge from, I would say that would be pretty much what the crazy is. Or if he's like, listen, I expect X amount of targets. I want to be the number one weapon. I'm not budging from that. Maybe that would be a crazy request. I don't think any of those things are going to happen. But one thing that did happen today that kind of gives us a little bit of a behind the scenes peek of Brandon Aiyuk and what you might expect him to get paid. Devontae Smith, Philadelphia Eagles. Interestingly enough, after just 3 years in the NFL, got his contract extension, and it amounts to roughly $25 million a year. So the question is, how much better is Brandon Aiyuk, or is he better than Devontae Smith? I think first thing you're going to say is, yeah, of course he's better than Devontae Smith. But when you look at the numbers for the last 3 years, they're the same age, by the way. They've been almost identical, down to yardage, everything. Now, Devontae Smith has a little little bit more catches, a little bit more targets. But if you were to take the yards per catch average from Brandon Aiyuk and add in the catches that Devontae Smith has, you would still roughly have the same numbers. Now, I think the thought is that Brandon Aiyuk is ascending. You look at his last year compared to Devontae Smith, there was certainly a gap there. And if Devontae Smith is kind of staying flat or slightly getting better, and Brandon Aiyuk is on this trajectory of getting way better, then obviously in a year or two, Brandon Aiyuk is going to be clearly better than Devontae Smith. Now, Brandon Aiyuk also doesn't benefit from A.J. Brown being on the other side, but he does benefit from some good players. CMC, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. So let's assume that the floor now is $25 million for Brandon Aiyuk. The number that I've always said that I would expect for Brandon Aiyuk is around $27 million. I think that's fair. I don't think I would go much above that, maybe around $28 million max, but that's where my ceiling would be. And I think the 49ers have to have had budgeted for at least $25 million, which is now the new floor. So we know the floor is $25 million because Devontae Smith, roughly the same stats as Brandon Aiyuk over the last 3 seasons, just got $25 million. And I would say the ceiling isn't much higher than that. 25 to 27 million is probably what we're going to expect. And I think the 49ers are probably budgeting for that. Now, the Eagles, interestingly enough, are in a similar situation to the 49ers where they have another really high paid receiver. They've got a quarterback that's been paid. They have some other players on the team that are highly paid as well. So how come they're able to afford it and shouldn't the 49ers be able to? Well, yeah, certainly that is the case. But much like the San Francisco 49ers, they don't really have to make a decision for another year or two based off of the way that those contracts are worked. So the 49ers signing Brandon Aiyuk this year is not the issue. It's next year when he makes more money and Deebo Samuel is making more money that they have to make a decision. So the Eagles are in a very similar situation when it comes to their wide receiver room. 49ers certainly can make it work. I expect that they do make it work. Now, the last option is Brandon Aiyuk possibly playing on his 5th-year option. I think that would be a disaster. Really, the precedent that was set not only was the floor as far as the price that Devontae Smith just got, but it's also that he got paid after just 3 years in the league. Also a first-round pick. They easily could have waited a year and put him in a situation like Brandon Aiyuk where he's going into that 5th-year option, what have you, but they decided to do it after just 3 years. So if the 49ers say, hey, Brandon, we want you to play on the 5th-year option. Now, Brandon doesn't have a lot of leverage. He's eventually going to have to play if he wants to accrue the year. I understand that. But I think that that would be operating in bad faith, not just based off of Devontae Smith, who got paid after 3 years, but also the precedents that the 49ers, as E. Kim has stated, has set, which is, hey, you go into that final year. That's when we traditionally work on contracts. I think that's also why you are hearing rumblings that the 49ers are working on a contract, possibly with Deommodore Lenoir as well, which I think is a good move. So I don't expect Brandon Aiyuk to play on his 5th-year option. I don't expect him to get traded. I'm not saying, let me say this. I would say it's more likely that Brandon Aiyuk gets traded than him playing on that 5th-year option. I don't think either is a high likelihood, though. I think Brandon Aiyuk will be here. I think that number has always been around 27 million, and that's what I would expect. So we will see. Well, salute, Jesse. No, Tampa is not at all. Tampa's very nice. Yeah, he'll be back. He's got some personal things going on. I'll let him tell the story if he decides that he wants to. Know that he's good, though. Things are going to be fine, but he's working through some things. He should hopefully be back next week. But until then, I'll find a way to hold it down. Brother Bob says, how will the Eagles work with 50+ million quarterback and wide receiver rooms? Yeah, again, it all comes down to how contracts are structured. So, first of all, Devontae Smith's contract, it best case scenario for him would kick in next year. It might not kick in really fully for 2 more years. It just might be a full 2-year extension, and then he'll play on that 4th and then the 5th year, and then after that, he'll finally get the high number. So that high number might not kick in for another 3 seasons for him. And then if you look at Jalen Hurts, the way his contract's structured, I think it's still relatively low this next year. I'd have to look at the cap hit for sure, but the average, annual value is pretty high. And then AJ Brown's number is really low right now as well. So, it's all in how they're structured. You look at Debo's, it's a big number next year. It's a bigger number this year, but it's a big number next year. And then BA, they may escalate and it may be a big number next year, or it might not be a big number for 2 years, depending on how they structure things. So you can make it happen. You just can't let it happen for multiple years in a row. I mean, basically, by the end of next season, 2025, they would certainly have to make a decision. Likely, they're going to make a decision at the end of this year. And really, I don't think that Debo will be back on the team in 2026, but we will see. We will see. Yeah, Jets gang, you've been around forever. I feel like this trash talk thing from you, and I love it, by the way. I see you in all the chats, hanging out in Richie's chats and whatnot. Love Richie. But I do find it funny. You've been talking trash for quite a while. It hasn't fared well for you thus far. I'm just saying. April and Corey, hello. April and or Corey, maybe you're both watching together. Evening, Jesse, Toronto, Canada. Nice. That's awesome. 49ers diehard fan here. Thanks for always putting together great and honest content. Niners fans north of the border. Love you, stud. Keep up the incredible work. Thank you so much. That is very, very kind of you. Love you right back. Much appreciated. Okay. Topic number 2. Matt Mayoko came out and said that the 49ers just might draft a receiver in round 1. And I think that probably shocked a lot of people, because the assumption is if Brandon Aiyuk is here, why would you draft a wide receiver in round 1? Now, it's a very heavy wide receiver draft. We do know that. There's a ton of talent there. But at 31, the receivers are going to be picked through a little bit. Who are you actually going to get? There has to be a receiver or 2 in mind for Kyle Shanahan. And I will say this, I believe the one receiver that would get Kyle Shanahan to potentially jump and take at 31 would be Adonai Mitchell. I believe that he's the guy. He's the one to me that is kind of a hybrid between Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb. And if you remember going into that draft a few short years ago, it was actually CeeDee Lamb that Kyle was rumored to really like. And even after the draft, he stated as much. He really liked CeeDee Lamb. Now, they weren't really in a position to get him. I mean, unless they wanted to trade up super far. But ultimately, they went with Brandon Aiyuk. That's been a great pairing. He said that he had Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb pretty much even. I don't know how true that is, but either way, I think Adonai Mitchell is kind of the hybrid. You look at him, you look at his frame, he's built similar. He's a really good route runner, which is, both those guys can get open through their routes. He's faster. His top end speed is certainly faster. And, athletically, I think he's a little bit more gifted than the other two, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate. When you watch him play, I know that he ran 4.3, what was it, like 4.34 or something like that. He doesn't play at a 4.34 speed. He plays more like a high 4.4s, which is fine. You don't need blazing speed to be elite in the NFL as a receiver. We see it all the time, but I just think that he's kind of the guy that fits the mold. Just talking about Deebo Samuel, saying that I believe this is his last year on the team. Well, if that's the case, you do need a replacement. Jennings is also a free agent after this year, and I like Jennings a lot. I love having Jennings on this team. However, he's not a number 2 wide receiver in this league. And if the 49ers are going to rely on him to be that number 2 receiver, that'd be a little worrisome. I'm not going to lie, that'd be a little worrisome. So I don't believe that is the case. I believe that They certainly are going to take a receiver at some point in this draft, and maybe that receiver pans out, maybe that receiver doesn't pan out. But I believe the receiver that Matt Mayoko may be alluding to is Adonai Mitchell, assuming that he's available. It's going to be tough. I mean, there are some receiver needy teams right in front of them. We know the Bills could use a receiver. You never know what the Ravens are going to do. We know that some of those early teams are going to take those top receivers. The top 3 are probably going to be gone within the first 10 or so picks. And then after that, it really could go in any order depending on what you prefer. Adonai Mitchell could be a top 17 pick. He may fall to 31. All things are possible. But if he's available, don't be shocked if the 49ers take him. Do not be shocked. And the question is, would you be upset if they took a receiver round 1? No, it doesn't even have to be Adonai Mitchell. Maybe whoever your guy is that's realistic that could fall there. Whether it's, I don't know, who's your guy? McConkey? Like whoever that guy is it, I don't know, whoever your receiver is. If he falls there, would you be upset if the 49ers took him? Put that in the chat real quick. I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. Yeah, I know he really has. Yeah, they do. They do for sure. Did it just show? No, okay. I was gonna say I don't think it's gonna show. I don't think it's gonna show. Brother Bob says, bruh, I was being sarcastic. Some 49er fans trip. Yeah, I'm sure you were, but it's still a realistic thing. I think that there are people that are thinking what you were saying, Brother Bob. So I know I didn't necessarily read it sarcastically, but I think that it's a legit question, and some people probably have that question. So that's totally fair. Okay, let's look at worst case scenario for the 49ers at 31. Here's my worst case scenario that I've come up with. Assuming that the 49ers don't trade up, and once they get to 31, there is nobody willing in the wheelhouse of making it worth the 49ers while that is willing to trade up into that 31 pick, and the 49ers can't trade back either. So they're stuck at 31. Okay. 6-ish tackles are now off the board. Jackson Powers Johnson off the board. 5-ish receivers, including Adonai Mitchell, off the board. 5 or so secondary players are all gone. Here's what the 49ers would realistically be looking at. They'd be looking at the safety Nubin. They'd be looking at Morgan, who's been my guy. I love Morgan. I would be fine with them taking him. I would prefer that they move back a little bit and do it, but Morgan is a guy that they could take. They could take the center and Frazier. They could take McConkey, who we recently talked about. They could take TJ Tampa, or they could take Rosengarten. I believe that is worst case scenario that the 49ers are looking at. And out of these guys, what is the order that I would prefer that they take them? Now, I know that we've got mock drafts out there saying that Rosengarten might go 31 to the 49ers. I think Rosengarten's probably a decent player. I feel like all of these guys might be a reach at 31. I don't know if I would be ecstatic about Rosengarten. Now, he might end up being good. He might be fine. But 6'6", around 300 pounds, we've kind of had that guy in place. Is it another situation like they've already had? I don't know. You tell me. So Rosengarten for me would probably be 4th on that list. My order would be Nubin, because I think he's the best safety in this draft. I think he is the best safety in this draft. So I would be okay if they went Nubin there. Morgan, number 2. I've been talking him up, feels like forever. So I would be fine with Morgan there. Frazier, I think, is the second best center. So I would probably go him, and then maybe Rosengarten. And then I would probably go Tampa, and then McConkey would be my order if that's worst case scenario. But I think it's realistic that this is what they're looking at if they don't trade up. And I don't know that any of these guys, at least off rip, make you super excited. I think that multiple of these guys, maybe all these guys, might end up being pretty decent prospects, but this is kind of the spot that you're in. Pick 31 is, yes, it is a first round pick, but it's damn near a second round pick. And there's so many good players at positions of value for the 49ers that are just going to be drafted before you have a chance to pick at 31. This is a realistic scenario for them. So I'm going to give you the names again. I'm curious to see what you guys say in the chat, who you would pick. So it'd be Nubin, Morgan. This is worst case scenario for the 49ers. Nubin, Morgan, Frazier, McConkey, Tampa, Rosengarten. Worst case scenario. Who are you taking at 31 if that is the case? I would go with Nubin number 1. That would be my choice. I think the 49ers can use a safety. I think he's just different enough than the other two that they have in-house where he could play with either of those guys. They could even do a 3 safety look at times. I would probably go with Nubin. I'm comfortable with Nubin, and I do think he's the best safety in this draft. At the very least, the way that I look at it is Morgan is a guy that I like, but he's 6th, 7th, 8th best tackle, realistically. Frazier, to me, is 2nd, maybe 3rd best center in this draft. McConkey, I mean, we're, 6 receivers deep at this point. Tampa, we're 4 or 5 corners off the board. And then Rosengarten's the same issue as Morgan. Whether you have Morgan higher or you have Rosengarten, you're looking at the same issue. At the very least, I'm getting the best player, in my opinion, at his position in the draft. So that's probably where I would feel most comfortable going. I would go with Rosengarten. That would be my choice. Raymond says Rosengarten would be in the mix to start in 2025. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at. But can he play left tackle? That's the question. Because the 49ers, at this point, I wouldn't guarantee that Trent Williams is going to be here year after year. So you almost have to assume that he's going to retire each and every offseason until he does. Now, maybe you get lucky, you squeeze one more out of him, what have you. But when they signed McKivitz, as frustrating as that was on the surface, because it's like, dude's probably going to start at right tackle, which is possible, maybe even probable. The way that I saw it is this is kind of future proofing. So if they do get a left tackle in this draft, that guy can essentially sit a year, take over for Trent Williams next year, and you still have your right tackle in place. You're not going into a situation where you're going to lose your left and your right tackle, both your bookends in one offseason. You're guaranteeing that you're not going to lose both guys in one offseason. So a guy like Rosengarten, Morgan, whoever you get here, potentially might sit a year. So, but I don't, and I agree. I would prefer to have Rosengarten in round 2. But if you can't trade back, what do you do? If that's the guy that you like, he's not going to be there. I don't think that Rosengarten's going to be there when you pick in round 2, 63. So you're going to have to trade up to go get him. And it's like, well, get your 5th-year option, especially if he's going to sit for a year. Maybe that is the thing. I don't know. To me, Nubin would be the pick, though. And that's the other point. Very good point. You cannot assume. You cannot assume he's going to play he's not going to play a full year. He doesn't play full years anymore. Unfortunately, he doesn't play full years. So, I don't know. When did he play, though? Wasn't it like his sophomore year? It's been a while. Left tackle, and then he moved to right tackle because of Penix. I read it as you said it. Michael Penix. Yeah. I know he was protecting his blind side, but now he's been there for 2 years. Is he a left tackle or is he a right tackle? And if he's the future left tackle, I'm good with that. But at 31, it does seem a little rich. I don't know. All right, let's talk about Brock Purdy for a second. First full offseason that he's going to get. I think we all expect that he improves a little bit. the very least, which would be awesome. But we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk this offseason. Next year, we're going to be talking about Brock Purdy. And what the 49ers do with Brock Purdy, not only how much they pay him, but how long that contract is going to tell you what they truly feel about Brock Purdy. Of course, they're going to say all the right things. They're probably going to give him big money, and they're probably going to give him a long-term deal unless he just flops this year. But let's assume that it looks just as good, if not a little bit better next year. Okay. You would expect 5-year deal, high money for Brock Purdy. But if that deal is not as high of money, or it is a 3-year deal, that gives you a little bit of insight in what they think about Brock Purdy, right? They're giving themselves an out on Brock Purdy, which means that they're not fully sold. But the question really is less about what the 49ers are going to decide to do, because I think the ultimate answer is they will pay him regardless of whether that's a 3-year contract, 5-year contract, 10-year contract, whatever that looks like. But one thing I continuously see in my mentions on Twitter and also in the comment section, not only on my shows, but on other people's shows, is Brock Purdy's different. Brock Purdy's a good Christian man, and he's going to take less money because that's the right thing to do. And he wants to make sure the 49ers are taken care of. I call BS. I absolutely call BS. Now, I think he is a good Christian man. I'm a Christian myself. I love that. I respect that about him. But that is not going to stop him from asking for an astronomical amount, nor should it stop him from asking for an astronomical amount. Brock Purdy, at this stage in his life, is playing for peanuts when it comes to starting level quarterback play, especially a guy who's top 15 in the league, top 10 in the league, whatever you rank him. Okay. He is playing for basically nothing. And when you look at the players right now getting over $40 million a year, let's go through the list real quick. We're going to work from the bottom up. So you've got Daniel Jones at $40 million. You've got Dak Prescott at $40 million. By the way, asking for roughly $60 million right now, which is why he hasn't been re-signed or extended by the Dallas Cowboys as of yet. We will see what he eventually ends up getting, but somebody's going to pay him big money, whether it's Dallas or somebody else. You've got Matthew Stafford at $40 million a year. You've got Josh Allen at $43 million. You've got Mahomes at $45 million. You've got Watson at $46 million. Remember, he's on the fully guaranteed money. You've got Murray at $46 million. You've got Hurts at $51 million. You've got Lamar at $52 million. Herbert at $52.5 million, and Burrows all the way up at $55 million. So, do you believe that Brock Purdy, even if he gives them a quote-unquote discount, is going to be anything under Daniel Jones? Hell no. Absolutely not. He's going to be in the $50+ million range. Okay. That is what he's probably going to ask for, and that is what he's going to get. If he makes anything less than, I would say, 48, I would be absolutely shocked. Absolutely shocked. Again, assuming he has another year like this or better, it won't be less than 48 million. Because you got to remember, guys like Jones, Prescott is at the end of his contract, so that was a while ago. Stafford, I believe, re-signed or extended when he got traded, so that was a couple years ago. Allen's deal is a couple years old. Mahomes' deal is 45 million, but it was done 3-4 years ago. Murray's deal is now 3 years old. So you look at the salary cap during those times. If those guys were on the market today getting paid, that number would go up big time. Hurts, very recent, 51 million. Lamar, very recent, 52. Herbert, 52.5, and Burrow, 55. All of these were done in the last 2 years. So that's really the new precedence is $50+ million. And that was all of these, by the way, were before this year's salary cap that just went up $30 million and is projected next year to go up roughly another 30 million. So when you look at what the salary cap numbers were versus what these guys are getting paid, that puts new quarterback pay in that $60 million range. Now, I do think that Brock Purdy is cognizant and aware enough to not necessarily go up to the $60 million range, knowing that, okay, I do got to take I got to give the 49ers a little bit of a break here if I want to continue to compete. But that number is not 40. That number is not 30. That is certainly not the number. The number is going to be $50+ million, 48 minimum, but probably 50+. So anybody who thinks like, oh, Brock Purdy's going to give this discount, why? Why would he? Why would he? Brock Purdy, just like any football player, this is a harsh league. If Brock Purdy tears something next week and is unable to play ever again, do you think that the 49ers are just going to be nice and fork out a bunch of money for him? No. They're like, hey, thanks for playing for really cheap for a couple years. Sorry it didn't work out for you. Now, hopefully he's got some sort of insurance. A lot of these athletes do, and he would be good, but he's not going to be good because the 49ers are going to do the right thing by him. He'll be good because he took insurance out on his body and is getting paid out through that. So Brock Purdy, when it comes time to get the first contract especially. Now, when quarterbacks are getting a second contract or players are getting second contracts, things start to shift a little bit. You start to realize your mortality in the league. Maybe you've fallen short of a Super Bowl throughout that whole contract. You kind of start to realize what it takes. Now you can start to see maybe a player taking a little bit less because they've gotten the big money, they've got life-changing money, and they're trying to win a Super Bowl. That's the number one goal. And so that's what they do. Now, of course, Brock Purdy's number one goal is to win a Super Bowl, but Brock Purdy has to make sure that he is doing right by himself and right by his family. That number is going to be massive. He's not going to give a big break to the 49ers, nor should he. He deserves to get paid, whether it's by San Francisco or anybody else. I am pro Brock Purdy getting paid, and I think he's going to get a massive number. So the question becomes, well, if the 49ers don't win this year and Brock Purdy gets paid $50+ million, how are they ever going to win a Super Bowl at that number? I don't know. I don't know that it's possible. But Brock Purdy deserves to get paid, and he will get paid. So I just want to be clear because a lot of people seem to think that he's just going to do the nice thing and take $30 million because I don't know. I mean, I feel like quarterbacks are. In fact, I was having this conversation with Coach, and I wish Coach was here to kind of have it with me. But quarterbacks are politicians in a sense, where they got to be a little bit different than everybody else on the team. You know, quarterbacks traditionally aren't going to be unfollowing teams on social media and doing those types of things. They're going to play the game the proper way. And as politicians, it's almost like you've got this fake sense of security in these players. Like Brock Purdy somehow has sold this image that he's willing to take $30 million. And a lot of people believe this. This isn't like one crazy comment. I've seen hundreds of these comments. Oh, Brock, $30 million. It's just Brock. I mean, look at him. He's Brock. Why wouldn't he take a pay cut, a massive pay cut, and get 20 million less annually than what he's worth? Why wouldn't he do that? Why wouldn't he take a 40% pay cut? It's Brock. I don't know what it is about Brock Purdy that has sold everybody on this fact that he's going to take this super low number, it's not going to happen. It is absolutely not going to happen. So don't expect it to happen. Expect that number to be 48 plus. If he's nice, it'll be 48. That's if Brock gives them the discount, the hometown discount, the team-friendly deal. It'll be 48 million. That would be the nice number, not 30 million. It's likely going to be over 50, though. So that's what you can expect. And then you can have the conversation from there. Is he worth it? Is he a franchise? All those conversations, and we'll have him plenty next offseason. But that's where the number's going to be. The discount is 48 million. That's the discount, not 30 million. I don't know how anybody's got that number in their mind, but I've seen it way, way too often. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah, of course he does. Of course he does. That's the other thing. I don't even know. He's from Arizona. Like this whole like, let's throw Wranglers and cowboy boots, a straw hat, and a John Deere tractor. We're going to give that all to Brock and make a commercial. And now he's a farmer. He's from Arizona. How much farming has Brock Purdy done in his life? Because he went to Iowa State. Like all of a sudden he's like this farm boy. I don't know that that's the case. But hey, do what you got to do to get paid. KB Toys, if Brock Purdy has a season as good or better this next season, I'll bet you whatever it is that you want to bet that 35 million is not even close to what he gets. I'll give you a $5 million buffer. I'll comfortably give you a $5 million buffer. It isn't 35 million. Let's see who's making 35 million. Let's go look real quick. Let's see who's making 35 million. First of all, Bosa's almost making 35 million. Here we go. 35 million. He's going to get paid Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr money. That's what he's going to get paid. Baker Mayfield is nearly 30 years old and has bounced team to team to team. Derek Carr got his deal like, I mean, what are we talking? 5 years ago, something like that. I think the original deal was signed like 5 years ago, and then they kind of reworked it as time went. But I mean, oh, and by the way, his cap number jumps to $51 million next year. So never mind. It got reworked when he went to the Saints. So the average is 37-ish, but his cap hit goes up to 51 million next year. That's Carr. No chance in hell it's $35 million. Absolutely not. Hey, listen, and to be fair, if you're right, come back and brag all you want. It's not going to be $35 million, though. Absolutely not going to happen. Keenan, member for 6 months, says, hope all is blessed. Much love. Appreciate you, Keenan. Matt, member for 6 months. What's up, Matt? Purdy, 58 million a year. What's up, Leslie? You mean Jesse? How many watching now would take 30 million over 50 million? Nobody. 0 people. And here's the thing. Brock Purdy, the way that he can help the 49ers is after 2-3 years, he can just restructure, save money. And that's how quarterbacks help teams out, is by restructuring. But they don't do it by taking 35 million annually when you can get paid 50 plus million. It's just not going to happen. Matt says the bye week, he was helping Jenna's family farm. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So her family has a farm. Is that what it is? Okay. Okay. We'll see. It really said Leslie, but it's okay. The J is close-ish to the L, one letter over. We'll be good. We'll be good. No big deal. Okay, I thought this was an interesting topic that I saw. Somebody had posted, and a lot of people said he wasn't. Somebody posted that Steve Young, they asked if Steve Young is a top 10 quarterback of all time. Now, I will preface this by saying Steve Young's my GOAT. He's who I grew up watching. He's my favorite player of all time. Got a Steve Young signed helmet right here. Okay. So, favorite player of all time. I learned to throw left-handed because of him. Like, that's how much I love Steve Young. Pretty much every report I did growing up in school was either about Steve Young or Jerry Rice. Like, I'm a Steve Young stan, to be fair. That being said, Steve Young is absolutely a top 10 quarterback of all time. Absolutely a top 10 quarterback of all time. His accolades enough are putting him there. He's a 4-time touchdown, league-leading touchdown thrower, 3-time TD percentage leader, 2-time interception percentage leader in a good way, 5-time completion percentage leader, 2-time yards per game leader, 3 times first team All-Pro, 2-time league MVP, and 1-time Super Bowl MVP. The accolades are there, even though his career was a shorter one, due to concussions. And then obviously we know the story about the sitting behind Joe Montana and Tampa and all the other things. But accolades say he's a top 10 quarterback of all time. But the eye test also tells you top 10 quarterback of all time. Steve Young, before Drew Brees, was arguably the most accurate passer of all time. Now, you look at Drew Brees, who I think a lot of people would have him in their top 10, especially because of the number accumulation that he has. But Steve Young was almost as accurate as Drew Brees, and that was like the number one thing that Drew Brees did. He's like the most accurate passer of all time. Well, Steve Young was right there. You look at his efficiency numbers, touchdown to INT ratio during that time of play, it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then you add in the athleticism. Man, I don't know how anybody can say that Steve Young's not a top 10 quarterback of all time. You've got the accuracy, you've got the anticipation. His arm was a plus arm. I think he had a stronger arm than Drew Brees. Not quite as accurate, but he's on the level. He's got a better arm than Drew Brees. He's got a bigger stature. Certainly a better athlete. Man, Drew Brees is in your top 10 or sniffing your top 10, and Steve Young has to be there. Steve Young has to be there. The only quarterbacks that I would say are guaranteed better than Steve Young, in my opinion, would be Tom Brady, obviously. Joe Montana, obviously. Those guys are 1, 2. Mahomes is right on his way. I mean, shoot, some people would put him at number 2 already. I don't know if I can go there yet, but he's probably top 3. And he's only accumulating more. So, I mean, you've got Brady, Montana, Holmes, sure. I would say you have to put Favre above him just because they were in the league together and Favre was the better player. I mean, he had more MVPs. He won the head-to-head matchups pretty regularly. So I would probably put Favre above him. I think I would put Rodgers above him. I think Elway and Marino probably are the guys that I would say. And then if you want to throw in like an old timer, Unitas, I could see the argument there as well. So that puts Steve Young like worst case scenario at 10. But I think you can make an argument of Steve Young over Unitas. I think you can make an argument of Steve Young over Marino. Maybe even Favre, I guess. Although I would say probably not. And then I guess depending on where you have Favre, maybe you have him above Elway. You could make the argument with him and Elway. But Unitas and Marino for sure, the argument's there to be had. So I would say best case scenario, he's top 8. And worst case, he's the 10th best quarterback. I have him above Drew Brees. I have Big Ben above Drew Brees personally. I would put Big Ben above Drew Brees. Drew Brees had crazy accumulative stats, but I think Big Ben's the better player. We've talked about this before. And I think they're both just outside the top 10. So I would have Steve Young, no-brainer top 10. Now, where you want to rank him in the top 10? Sure. Why wouldn't you put Favre or Elway above him? I got to know the argument. Because, again, Favre and Young were in the league at the same time. Favre won more MVPs. Favre, I get it's a team game, but Favre was winning those playoff matchups pretty repeatedly. I hated Favre. I hated Green Bay in the 90s, but Favre's better, man. Favre's better. Yeah, I had Manning in there. I said Manning, didn't I? Did I not have Manning in there? How did I not have? You're right. Manning is definitely in there. Manning's ahead of Rodgers. You're right. I don't know how I didn't say Manning. So it'd be Brady, Montana, Mahomes, Manning, Rodgers, Elway, Favre, Marino, Unitas, Young. Okay, so I had the number right at 10. I just somehow didn't say Manning's name. But Manning was there. I had him on the list. That's how I had Young at number 10. So yes, Manning is also there. Manning is top 5. So my bad for not saying his name, but he's on the list, and that's how I would have Young's floor at 10. His ceiling, I think, is at 8. But I can't put him above Favre. I can't do it, personally. No. What would your list be, KB? I got to know your list. Mine, personally, Brady, Montana, Mahomes, Manning, Rodgers, Elway, Favre, Marino, Unitas, Young. I have Young at 10. Then I would go Breeze and Big Ben and then Breeze. So those would be my top 12. Yeah, he did. He threw a lot of interceptions. But damn. I mean, he won a lot of MVPs too, man. And he threw a lot of touchdowns as well. So, just throwing it in there. Yeah, I don't know if I said it. I have him on the list. I don't know if I said him or not. What's up? I got to know, KB Toys. What is your top 10 list? Where did I go wrong on my top 10 list? I'm definitely open to discussion. Of those top 10, who does Brock play like? None of them? But who? It doesn't really matter. I mean, are you trying to make like the conversation that, are we already going there with Brock Purdy? Are we saying he's going to be a top 10 quarterback of all time? Yeah, Hall of Famer? No, I don't think you're going there. The closest, I mean, would have to be in the top 10. He's not young. Unitas. Marino was more stationary. Favre and Marino had a cannon. Favre had a cannon. Elway had a cannon. Rodgers had a cannon. Manning was more stationary. Mahomes, we know. Montana's got to be the closest as far as the top 10 list goes. But I don't think he plays like any of them. I think he plays like Brock Purdy. And I think that's fine. And I don't think you have to play like any of them to be an eventual Hall of Famer either. So you're so full of it. You're so full of it. Kirk Cousins. No, his style, I know what you're saying. I'm just pulling your chain, Stevo. It's Montana. Out of that list, it's got to be Montana. He's got to be the closest to Montana as far as style of play. Would you agree? I mean, who else on the list does he play even remotely close to? He's got some traits, right? He's got some traits of some of these guys, maybe, but I think most of these Montana has a bigger arm than he did, but it's out of this list, I would say his and Manning's are probably the weakest on this list. And then, but Manning was also gigantic. And his processing was, I mean, I don't think anybody processed as good as Manning ever, right? So I don't know. It would have to be Montana if it's anybody on this list. It'd have to be Montana. Ryan Fitzpatrick? Yeah. I don't know. I think Fitzpatrick was pretty quick in his day. I get it. He had some good years. He got paid multiple times. I think he's quicker. I think he's a little bit more elusive than Fitzpatrick, and I think Fitzpatrick's arm's a little bit stronger, so a little bit different there. But I think he has some traits of some of these guys. Maybe some, like, at least right now, like pour-in traits of some of these guys. Eli had a pretty good arm though too. I think Eli had a pretty good arm. Eli was big too. Eli was big, and he wasn't mobile either. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Like, I don't know that I can put Drew Brees in my top 10. I mean, I'm not putting him in my top 10. I have him at 12. But I don't know. I have Steve Young. Steve Young's number 10. I have him at number 10. So, thought it was an interesting question. Figured I'd have a throwback question on here, but Steve Young for me he's my GOAT. Man, he's my GOAT for sure. My favorite player of all time, Steve Young. Can't tell me nothing. He's my number one, period. So, there we go. Steve Young, top 10 quarterback of all time. Go argue with a wall. All right, y'all. Listen, shorter show tonight, just under an hour. I'll be back tomorrow with Sunil. I forgot what day it was already. It's the beginning of the week, and I'm already forgetting what day it is. Holy crap. All right, y'all. Stay blessed. Thank you so much for rocking with me. I'll be back tomorrow night. Peace.